it's not where it's supposed to be. Wait a second. I had to have a problem. Okay, I'm now up. Share. Okay, here I share this. I get the chat on the side. And I'll play. So here, that's the title of my presentation, Hong Kong, Paradise on Earth, question mark. And one of the questions we'll see towards the end is if I've convinced you that it is or it's not a paradise on Earth. To start with, we just go directly to a quiz. And the first question is, when you're told about Hong Kong, what comes to your mind? A, do you see the do you see my chat there or not?
We can, yes, we see the chat. Shall we tell our answer in the chat box?
I won't see the chat. So when you're told about Hong Kong, what comes to your mind? A, B, or C? Let people answer what it should be, and then I'll start with my. So Lillian, you make me a sign to tell me when I should start. Next one, that lot A.
Right.
B.
So a lot of people said a lot of exclamation marks, and some choose B, and then some choose 2 question marks. But it's kind of in a multiplied way.
Okay. So let's start with the geography of Hong Kong.
Or ABC. It's a mixture of everything.
All right. So Hong Kong lies 114 degrees east and 22 degrees north. So with a bit of reference, if you go from the South Pole to the North Pole, you start in Australia with Perth, then you go to Indonesia with Bali, then you have Hong Kong, and a bit more above, you've got Beijing. If you go towards the west from Hong Kong, because we are on the Tropic of Cancer, that means you will reach Mecca, then you will reach Tamanrasset in the south of Algeria. You would have the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, and you end up in Hawaii in the Pacific Ocean. So that's the broad location of Hong Kong. That's in the south of China. If you zoom in, then you have Hong Kong on the little bottom right corner here of this map, which is the map of the Pearl River Delta. So if you look at the cities around Hong Kong, you have Hong Kong, Macau, which are famous, Shenzhen, which is also pretty well known nowadays. It used to be a village 30 years ago. Now is a 12 million inhabitant city. And you have Dongguan, Foshan, and Guangzhou. For those of you who don't know, Guangzhou used to be called Canton. So it used to be very famous. It was the harbor city in the south of China that all the traders were using for trade with China. This map here that I'm showing to you hosts about 50 to 60 million inhabitants. And in terms of distance, if you go from Guangzhou to the northwest to Hong Kong to the southeast, that's about 100 kilometers. So the whole map would be maybe 100 miles in width or about. That gives you an idea. So it's a very, very dense region of the world with a lot of people living there. If I zoom in a bit more, I end up in Hong Kong itself. So that's the whole Hong Kong territory with a few islands. The big one in the southwest is Lantau Island with the new airport that is now, it's 20 years old. It's not completely new, but we still call it the new airport. And on the southeast, you would have like Hong Kong Island, so the island itself. And then above that, you have the continent that is quite a big part of the territories. The whole Hong Kong territories are roughly the size of half Luxembourg. Luxembourg, not the city, but Luxembourg country. So it's a pretty small territory in the world. And here, that's how it looks like when you arrive in Hong Kong by plane. So it's clearly one of the ideas that people have. It's very urban. It's a lot of high rises and skyscrapers. Unfortunately, because the plane was moving, the picture is a bit blurry. So I took another one. So that's from the jungle. It's a bit more clear from here, and you see clearly all these skyscrapers and high rises out of the jungle. I remind you, it's a jungle because we are under the tropic. Here comes our first questions. So Hong Kong was a British colony until 1997, when it was handed back to China. Why is it not British anymore? So answer A, because it was agreed with the emperor in 1842. Answer B is because it was agreed with the emperor in 1898. Or answer C, because Hong Kong needs fresh water. I'll let you answer. And Lilian, you'll tell me.
Answer B. Mike answers B. Oh, everyone answers B. Team, they're all Googling the historical facts.
Anyone answers B, that makes me.
Someone says A.
A.
Nicholas says A. Yes.
Okay.
And most would B or A. Majority B.
No C's?
No.
So everybody will learn something today because the answer is C. So 1842 was actually the conquest of Hong Kong Island by the British after the first Opium War. Then there was a second Opium War in 1860 where the British got a bit of territory above on the continent so that the harbor was completely safe. The harbor is basically between the continent and Hong Kong Island. And so that was after that second war, the British had secured the whole place. And then they negotiated in 1898 to get what we now call the new territories, which is the much bigger part of Hong Kong above what they had conquered earlier. But the agreement in 1898, was that it was a lease for 99 years. And therefore, in 1997, these new territories had to go back to China. That was the handover. And when Margaret Thatcher knocked at the door of China, Deng Xiaoping at the time, and said, okay, in about 15 years, we have to hand over the new territories back. How is it going to go? How shall we do this? Then the Chinese said, no, you're actually handing back Hong Kong Island as well. To which Margaret Thatcher said, oh, but that's not part of the agreement in 1898. And Deng Xiaoping said, yes, but you need water. And Hong Kong Island is too small to provide itself with water. So if China does not want Hong Kong Island to be independent, there was no way for Hong Kong to be independent. So if we look at the map again, within the cycle, we see Hong Kong Island and the peninsula, so the Kowloon Peninsula, which was acquired in 1860, and all the rest was the new territories that had to be handed over back to China. But eventually, in 1997, everything went back to China. But the real reason is because we needed water. The population had grown. So we have looked at the population in 1900. The Hong Kong population was 300,000 people. After when the communists took over China in 1949, it was about 2 million people, and nowadays it's about 7 million people. So clearly, the reservoir that are still available on Hong Kong Island that had been built in the 19th century were not sufficient to get water to the people. So, which brings me to my next slide. But yes, Hong Kong is a place of skyscrapers. Here you can see a few of them. with the head in the clouds. They are pretty high. All the clouds are pretty low, actually. You decide. But Hong Kong is also clearly a Chinese territory. So you have some Chinese architectural curiosity. This is actually a nunnery on the peninsula. It's a beautiful place. Reminds me of Kyoto in Japan somehow. But Hong Kong is also the place where you have contrasts. So if you take a car and drive a car in Hong Kong, chances are that either you are driving a cab or you are driving a Ferrari. There's not much in between because we don't have space for parking lots anyway. So that's typical of Hong Kong. And again, skyscrapers. To give you an idea, the skyscrapers here on this picture, the tallest one is the one on the right. It's the ICC. It's 420 meters high. I forgot to check what it is in feet this time. I checked other things in feet, but not the 420 meters. That's pretty high. On the left, you have a typical one, which is the Bank of China, with the square and triangles on that you can see. That's very distinctive. It's the same architect who did the pyramid in Paris. So this tower is about 300 meters high, which is the size of the Eiffel Tower. So that gives you a bit of an idea about these high rises, how high they can be. The highest one is actually not visible on this picture. It's on the other side of the harbor. The harbor that you can see here, you can see a few boats on this picture. So before I go for the next question, I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions there. Lillian, you'll tell me if there are.
I think that you mentioned it's like saying a lot of tall buildings, much like New York City. I feel it's more dense in the Hong Kong Island side, but I'm open to others' opinions or impression on these.
I haven't been to New York City, but I know that when I saw the information, there are more high rises as defined as they are, and I don't know what's the definition, how many floors it is, but there are more high rises in Hong Kong than in New York.
Oh, for Hong Kong Island.
Yeah, no, Hong Kong, the whole territory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, Hong Kong Island is, I think, is much smaller than New York.
Wow.
I think it feels a lot different to New York because New York's got skyscrapers going back 100 years, whereas Hong Kong, the skyscrapers look much more modern. You're in a city of glass and steel, not necessarily of concrete and brick.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Gary wants to ask, how does it compare to Singapore? I have the same question, actually.
Singapore is, I would say, you have the CBD is pretty high. It looks a bit like this, the central business district. The rest is lower. The residential part of Singapore feels lower than Hong Kong. But in terms of density that comes with the following question, Singapore has more construction. The territory in Singapore is smaller.
Yeah, I think in Singapore, they deliberately put a lot of green spaces, even vertically along the buildings or on the top of the buildings. They also deliberately put a lot of outdoor spaces when you're walking around. But the Hong Kong, absolutely, you feel you got out of the building, you can be hit by the car. You have to watch carefully. There's a really little space for the pedestrians and not much space for outdoor coffee drinking or anything. I always feel when I walk around Hong Kong Island, I feel I'm just a little, maybe not cockroach or beetle walking around the chopsticks in the chopsticks holder. So it's the chopsticks holder. All the buildings chopsticks. Yeah, now I started imagining myself as a cockroach, but but it does feel you walking around with the chopsticks.
So shall I go with the next question? So yeah, obviously, obvious question. What is the density of population of Hong Kong? So A, about 7,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. I've got the square mile density for Americans. 26,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, or 60,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. And Lillian, you'll tell me what comes up as.
Oh, okay. I'm very amateur on this. Okay, B. Most people choose B, and some choose C. No one chose A yet. So we got increasing amount of people choosing C. They'll go for the really high numbers.
Okay. So once again, it's A. So 7,000 inhabitants per square kilometer is the density of Hong Kong. You would have recognized the density of Monaco in B. So Monaco is much denser than Hong Kong. Although I saw a different figure from Monaco today, so I didn't change my slide, but it might be 20,000 inhabitants per square kilometer only, but still at least 3 times as much as Hong Kong. 60,000 inhabitants per square kilometer is actually the most dense district of Hong Kong, according to the official figures. So one of the tricks in that question is that Hong Kong is you've got a territory and you've got the places that are constructed. So you have very, very high density constructed places, but you have some others which are actually not constructed at all. So here is a picture of the jungle. This is Hong Kong. You see the sea in the background. You don't see a single building. So clearly that reduces the overall population density of the territory. And that's the theme of this presentation actually of Hong Kong is to show you that Hong Kong is a marvelous city, but it's also a place under the tropic that has absolutely nothing to do with what we imagine. A place with great outdoor space, huge and really like lush greenery, nature, and sort of hiking paradise. I actually didn't hike when I came to Hong Kong back in 2008, and very quickly I met people who told me, "Oh, hiking is great here," and I was not really interested. And I eventually started doing it, and I started enjoying it as well. It's a great place to walk around when you have time and when it's not too hot. That's a different problem that we may discuss a bit later. Which brings me to my next question. What is the size of the countryside in Hong Kong? I think I didn't say what it was. So it's less than 25%, about 50%, or more than 75%.
C. A. Rex says A.
D.
So this is polarized, either A or C.
A or C. Okay, so at least nobody's completely wrong with B this time. Completely wrong. So am I right? And it is more than 75% nature. If we go back very quickly to the map, you see it pretty well here. Actually, the constructed area along the coasts is pretty big, where it's written Hong Kong, but all the rest, all these green parts, it's actually the countryside. So you have a lot of countryside in Hong Kong, and that's also linked to the fact that you have mountainous terrain where it's not easy to build. That's a huge difference with Singapore. Singapore is very flat, so they build everywhere and anywhere in Singapore. In Hong Kong, it's completely different. If you look at Hong Kong Island, they built as high up on the hill as it could be built, but then it started to be really so steep that you couldn't build a skyscraper anymore. And so that's what saved Hong Kong from that concrete jungle. We have both the concrete jungle on one side and the real one in the mountains around. So that was the question. And here is another picture of the landscape you can see in Hong Kong. So again, the mountainous greenery on the side, a beautiful tropical beach with clear waters. That's more exceptional. The clear waters are actually in the northeast of Hong Kong, that's Sai Kung Peninsula. You don't see them everywhere. Sometimes they are not that clear. But we still have these, and it is a tropical place with some tropical features. Which brings us to the next question. How many islands are there in Hong Kong? 261 is A, 7,641 is B, or 17,508 is C.
Mike says B. And a lot of B's. And then Michelle says A. Someone says E. That is Mingji. What's E, Mingji?
I'm just twirling your legs.
Depends on what you mean by island. That's a very sophisticated answer. Mike says depends on what you mean by island.
The right answer is actually 261 only, but it's already quite big. I mean, when you realize that the territory is the size of half of Luxembourg, it's 261 islands is a lot of islands around. They are not all inhabited. You have two major islands, which are Hong Kong and Lantau. Hong Kong very much inhabited, Lantau much less. And then you have a few intermediate islands that are inhabited, and a lot of basically rocks in the sea with absolutely nothing there, so, but a few birds and animals. You would, I mean, the ones who said 7,641 were a bit optimistic on the size. It's actually the number of islands that you can find in the Philippines. So the Philippines is the archipelago 1 hour by flight from Hong Kong to the southeast. So it's the border of the South China Sea on the east. It's a lot of island when you have like 7,000. And for those who knew it was not 17,000, I guess you knew it was Indonesia, obviously, which is another archipelago in the region, but south of the South China Sea. Much farther away from Hong Kong, a few hours by plane, and obviously, yeah, the Indonesia is a huge territory going from west of the Malacca Straits and down all the way down to New Guinea. So it's really far, really big and long. I didn't check how long it is. And so the next one is to show you that thanks to this nature, we have a lot of animals in Hong Kong, and wild animals. So I am under the Chinese zodiac. I am actually a buffalo. So on this picture, you can see two buffaloes. One is me, and the other is not. I'll let you guess which one is which.
That's the first question.
That was on. So that's the buffaloes of Lantau Island. We have birds, obviously. We have bats, as some of you may know. I mean, our bats don't have coronavirus, actually, or they keep it for themselves. But we have some around. And we have insects. This is a mantis, the same type of mantis you can see anywhere. I couldn't get a picture of a spider as we can have here that are really, really impressive, nor of a snake. We have quite a few snakes, and some are lethal, some are not, which brings us to the next questions. What snakes cannot be found in Hong Kong? So in that case, it's a reverse questions. So what don't we have? Don't we have cobras? Don't we have pythons? Or don't we have taipans?
Most people think it's A, cobras. Jinda says it's A, majority is B, and thinks it's C.
So how many people thought it was C?
1.
So it's really an evening for learning things today, or a day for learning things.
Oh, there's this 2. Michelle and right. There are 2.
The snakes we cannot find in Hong Kong are taipans. Taipans are snakes I've never seen. These are very, very lethal ones that you can find in Australia. But we do have cobras and king cobras. I actually once saw a king cobra getting out of a river drain. It's very impressive. These are really long snakes, and they can climb vertically. It's pretty impressive. And we have pythons. I didn't see one myself, but they are around. I mean, I saw one in the zoo, but that doesn't count. But we do have pythons on the islands, and we do have cobras and king cobras. So the ones we don't have is the taipan. Is there any question about all I've said up to now?
Nicholas says no hiking in forest for me. You just need to have someone walking in front of you. Problem solved.
Yeah, it won't be so reassuring actually when it comes to cobras and king cobras. You don't know. You never know when they show up or from which side. So,
Nicholas,
yeah.
Nicholas, you can hire a Norwegian to walk ahead of you.
And okay, I'll think about it.
So, but there are not many. I mean, we have a few lethal snakes, but there are not many accidents in Hong Kong with snakes. Of course, there are some like anywhere else, but because as soon as you've got lethal snakes, you will have some accidents. But most of them are actually not out during the day. They are mostly out at night, and so we don't encounter them that often. And normally these snakes are scared about people, so they tend to leave before you get to them. But yeah, I mean they are around for sure.
Also seems that Hong Kong has this policy of every citizen has one right to ride a helicopter for the emergency. I think a snake bite can definitely qualify you for a free helicopter ride to the hospital. And also I read some article, maybe it's official website, saying if you were bitten by a snake, the first thing you should do is to take a picture. I don't know, it's take a picture of the snake or take a picture of the bite or take a picture for the Instagram.
Yeah, of the snake to make sure you get the right medicine.
I see. Makes sense.
But yeah. But if you have to catch the snake in order to take the picture, that's a bit dangerous as well.
Yeah, I would rather not to take that free ride for helicopter.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't been bitten in 10 years, so it's still possible to hang around and hide. So as you understood, so my presentation is about Hong Kong as a different place. So I now have a few pictures of the landscape we have here. So as you can see on that one, it can be pretty humid. Here we are in the clouds. Hong Kong is tropical and on the sea. So in the summer, it's not rare to have between 80 to 100% humidity, which makes it a bit tough hiking in summer, because the temperature, as soon as you're above 30 degrees Celsius, which is, how much is it in Fahrenheit? 30 must be about 80 Fahrenheit, 80 something. So with such a level of humidity, it can be really tough to hike around. So obviously the best place, the best time of the year is winter. So that's the sort of landscape you can get on the islands when you're hiking. And when you finish the hike at the end of the day, you can end up on a beach and relax, which is a very nice thing to do. So, but obviously it's not always like that, and you can have the crowd in the tube in Hong Kong. But this is to remind you that as soon as you're out of the crowd, you can get these mountains and enjoy the nature. And as you can see here, if you have a hike, you can walk for quite a few hours without encountering much people, actually, even sometimes, depending on the trail you're on. Here you can see Lilian and myself on the Sunset Peak, which is an introduction to the next question. In Hong Kong, what is the highest peak of Hong Kong? Is that 869 meters high? Is that 934 meters high? Or 957 meters high?
A, B, C. Oh. Basically, people take turns to answer A, B, C. So now B is the majority, slight majority. Now, yeah, more A's. Andre, most of your question are numbers.
There was a hint, actually, it's in order. The highest is 957 meters high. So here you can see at 869, that was the lowest of the three, is the Sunset Peak where we are. At the back, in the clouds, you can see a little island. It's actually not an island, it's actually the continent, and that's the highest peak in Hong Kong, which is called Tai Mo Shan, and at 957 meters high. And close to Sunset Peak, you have the Lantau Peak at 934 meters high. So now you're the lucky ones who have seen the three highest peaks of Hong Kong in 2 pictures. But so this is the great place for hiking and nature. But being under the tropic, we also have typhoons. So that's the unfortunate thing about Hong Kong. Here you can see some floods with the sea taking over. It's not because of climate change, it's just a typhoon, which is basically a hurricane. And it can be really nasty. We have 2 little videos. The first one is a beach, how it looks like after a typhoon. So it's, I would say, devastating. It brings quite a few things from the sea. It breaks the trees. So that was after the typhoon. And during the typhoon, it's recommended not to go outside. Some people do from time to time, and that's what it did. Yes, that's bad. So don't go out when there's a typhoon. And that was it for the presentation of Hong Kong today. This is one of the sunsets that we can enjoy every now and then over there. So I've been a bit quicker than I thought, actually. I don't know if there are any questions.
So I'm just gonna stop you sharing, Andre. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So should we do a little bit of the question and answer time for Andre and Lillian? I have the first.
And Mingji as well.
Yeah.
I met Mingji long times ago in Hong Kong, and she threw this the coolest party and the mid-level. And I remember she had this lovely place.
So
I still do on Zoom. I still do cool parties on Zoom these days.
Yes,
So,
party spirit goes on.
It never snows in Hong Kong. The trick for the snow in Hong Kong is that usually it's cold in winter, and winter is the dry season. So that's true. It doesn't snow, but it can be snowy weather. I remember once when there were icy roads on the top of Tai Mo Shan, and there are a lot of accidents. They had a hiking competition, and they had to stop the whole thing because people got hurt by slipping on the ice. So yes, we don't have snow because it's not snowing; it's dry. But we can have like 0 degrees temperatures from time to time. Not often, admittedly, particularly at sea level.
And the Hong Kong people are very fashionable. Probably at 5 degrees, you will see minsk, maybe you will see Canadian goose, and all the cool deep winter jackets being put on by the people, because they want to have the 4 seasons fashions, despite of not having a really cold winter.
I see the questions from Mike asking what the biggest surprise for someone arriving in Hong Kong. I guess it really depends on your experience. When I arrived there, I hadn't been to the big cities with skyscrapers and things, and I was really impressed by that. And also, but the weather, the tropical weather, where the temperature doesn't go down much during the night, was a very big surprise to me. So I remember the first time I get out of the hotel in the morning, the first morning in Hong Kong, it was cold inside because of the aircon, and I expected to go to a cool place outside, and suddenly it felt like super hot. So I don't feel it anymore, this sort of heat as I used to feel when I arrived in Hong Kong. But yeah, if you don't live in a hot country, that's the surprising thing, is how the heat and humidity can be oppressive, basically.
Andre, Greg asked, which is the most dense area in Hong Kong?
So I can't remember the name of the one I mentioned, but what is usually mentioned as the most dense is Mong Kok. So it's not a full district, but Mong Kok is a place in Hong Kong where you have some very small flats with a lot of people living in these flats. And what I've read on the internet is that it would be like 120,000 people per square kilometer there. But I don't know what is the exact surface that you take on. Maybe it's 120,000 people living on 1 square kilometer. And that's the part which is on the peninsula, which is very flat. So just opposite the Hong Kong Island and the old territories that were conquered in 1860.
Yeah, Mong Kok is also where the mafia stories, all the mafia movies were made. It's like the Hong Kong version of Godfather. All took place in Mong Kok.
Yeah, that movie called Chongqing Express. It's about the hotel in Cologne, Mong Kok area.
And
maybe you can pay a visit there.
There's also a very famous.
That Surprise said it's raining every day. That's not completely true, but in the rainy season, sometimes you can have like rain for a week in a row, and the rain is tropical, so it can be really heavy rain. So not always windy like on the video we show, but yes, the rain is a bit wet here.
And I recommend it literally is the Hong Kong version of Godfather. It's a trilogy called Internal Affairs. I highly recommend it. It's not only the best movie out of Hong Kong, it's literally on top of my best movie list. It's a trilogy about two guys, one mafia going undercover in the police force and one police force doing undercover in the mafia. The whole gangster stories throughout the three movies. It's just beautifully, fantastically done.
I think the story was sold to Hollywood, and then Hollywood made a similar stuff, but Hong Kong version is the best in our view.
I've got a question for you too, because now you lived both in Hong Kong and currently living in Singapore. Both of them are Asian hubs. They have some similarities in being cosmopolitan, quite famous and tourist friendly. What do you experience as the biggest difference between Hong Kong and Singapore from your living there in these two cities?
We don't have the nature in Singapore. So, and we are suffering from that because of the restrictions for travel at the moment. So this year has been really tough. So there is a little country park where you can hike for 3 hours in Singapore. But once you've done that trail, you just have to do it again. It's a bit poor in comparison to Hong Kong, where Hong Kong you have like literally hundreds of kilometers of trails. There are a lot of races in winter in Hong Kong, where you have the 50 kilometers of Hong Kong, where you go from the east to the west of Hong Kong Island in 50 kilometers. So it's more than a marathon, and it goes up and down quite a bit. You have on Lantau Island, you have a race which is 50, 70, and 100 kilometers. And you have a 100 kilometers race on the New Territories as well, which is very, very famous every year. So for that race, you start on the Friday evening and arrive on the Sunday morning, unless you're really, really nuts and you're running. I know a guy who did that in 12 hours. But 100 kilometers in 12 hours, that's a lot of running, because the up and down is about 5,000 meters, I think. So it's really, really tough races. So all this nature, beaches, you don't have them in Singapore. So yeah, it's better to be able to travel when you're in Singapore. While Hong Kong, you can really live there.
I do find that the museums in Singapore are better. If anyone disagree with me, I felt Singapore put more efforts on giving on the culture side. They did a great job on hosting exhibition before COVID. But I think Hong Kong's a bit lacking on this in terms of the culture side.
But the Philharmonie in Hong Kong is clearly worse than the one in Singapore. So there are still cultural things around in Hong Kong. So if there's no other question, I think we can wrap up here. Mm-hmm. So I thank you very much for your attention. I hope you learned something, and see you next time.
So maybe the last tip to go travel to Hong Kong, I find the best months is October till November. Those 2 months are really the best months to go for Hong Kong, and avoid the typhoon season, which runs from June to all the way to September actually. But you don't have to avoid the whole period. Just be aware of there could be typhoon hit and you could be trapped in the hotel for 2 days, like that.
So for that particular tough race, Andrea mentioned 100-kilometer hiking non-stop. You actually have to do it in a group of 4 people. If it's just you, doing all the way, it doesn't count. The 4 of you have to start at the same time and finish at the same time. It's called Oxfam Tree Walker. And only until when I arrived in UK, I figured out the connection, because Oxfam is the biggest charity organization in the UK. So it's in the name of this UK-based charity organization. Thank you very much, Andrea and Lillian, for showing us Hong Kong, which we normally wouldn't know about without living there. Because whenever we think of Hong Kong, we think about its food, nightlife, bars, shopping, electronic products, and money. It is the Asian financial center with a lot of banks and people working in finance. So you're sharing about the hiking there, the different type of animals, buffaloes and snakes. We know who to avoid next time if we want to go to Hong Kong, and a nice, beautiful beach, the photos. I hope this gives us an idea. On top of shoppings and food, when we go to visit Hong Kong, we still can include a few hiking routes and a visited beach for the to-do list in Hong Kong. Talking about travel, we always, most of the time, we talk about travel for this Zoom party. Travel, 200 years ago, I'm gonna have a conversation with Anne from her dark box, and she, because of her computer, she's not able to see. We're not able to see her, but Anne will be hosting a cultural storytelling next week. Anne, do you want to give us a little bit of hint what you are going to talk about?
Yeah, sorry about no picture. I'm on the wrong computer for this at the moment. Technical difficulties. Yeah, next week we're going back in history, and I'm going to talk about the Grand Tour, which happened in the 18th century, and it's a sort of early form of tourism for the wealthy elites of Europe. And they used to go traveling around, not a fortnight's holiday, a couple of weeks, but probably 2 or 3 years quite often they went for. It's like an extended gap year for wealthy people. But I'm particularly going to be focusing on the ladies who went traveling, because there were few of them, but they were really interesting people. So that's what I'm going to be talking about.
So next Sunday's topic is going to be Women of the Grand Tour. As I mentioned, during 18th century, we humans, we started this concept of travel. But back then, it was the privilege of the wealthy people who received a little bit of a Latin education. The gentlemen who had the time and the money would be able to travel for leisure and also for self-education to discover a little bit of the continental Europe. But there were a few fascinating women. Anne and I, we had a rehearsal, and I was really amazed by who these women were. Why did they travel? What was the context behind them being part of the few people following the gentleman, or not following their route, physical route, but following the concept of travel during 18th century. So next Sunday, same time, Anne from London will tell us the culture story of British woman, or there's a German lady as well.
That's right.
Fascinating woman who went on traveling during the 18th century to the continental Europe, and what is their legacy for us today in terms of all aspects of culture. So thank you very much, guys, for joining us today. Thank you for hosting, Andrea and Lillian. We will see you next week, and hopefully we will be able to see Anne's face next week.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. It went so fast.
So, you know, this is a game, like who's gonna leave last?
I'll be the last one. No, maybe Minji.
So
Yeah, I learned so much about Hong Kong, so it was so great actually. I never thought it was a great nature there. Even.
So Jinja, and have you been to Hong Kong at all? The two of you?
Yes, I've been to Hong Kong Disneyland.
Oh, Oh yeah, I went to Disneyland as well. Even for me, I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years, but when I was doing rehearsal with Andrea, I learned so many new things about Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting city, and yeah, I think it is definitely on my bucket list right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So-
But thank you, Minji, for hosting us.
Yes, so thank you very much for joining.
Thank
See you
you.
next week.
See
Bye.
you. Bye bye.